My name is Sarah, and I need to tell someone what happened to me last month. I keep thinking that if I write it all down, maybe I'll stop seeing those tiny red lights in my nightmares. Maybe I'll stop checking every corner of every room I enter, but I doubt it. I was 24, fresh out of graduate school with a psychology degree and drowning in student loans. The job market was brutal, and I was taking whatever work I could find just to keep my head above water. That's how I ended up responding to a Craigslist ad for a live-in companion position. The pay was almost too good to be true. $800 a week plus room and board to help care for an elderly man in Millbrook, New York, a small town about 2 hours north of the city. The man who hired me was named Vincent Thorne. He was 73 according to the paperwork, though he looked older. His face was deeply lined, with pale blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. He lived in a sprawling Victorian house that had been in his family for generations, he told me during our phone interview. The place sat on 15 acres of wooded land, completely isolated from the nearest neighbor. I just need someone to make sure I take my medications, he explained, in a voice that was surprisingly strong for his age. Help with some light housework, maybe cook a meal now and then. The house is big enough that you'll have your own space. The entire third floor. Complete privacy. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why he needed someone to live in rather than just a daily caregiver. I should have been suspicious of the generous salary for such simple work. But I was desperate. And desperation makes you overlook red flags that should be waving right in your face. I moved in on a Tuesday morning in early October. The house was even more imposing up close. 3 stories of dark wood and stone, with towers and bay windows that made it look like something from a Gothic novel. The interior was a maze of narrow hallways, heavy wooden doors, and rooms that seemed to go on forever. Vincent gave me a tour of the main areas: the kitchen, living room, his bedroom on the first floor, and the second floor library where he spent most of his time. "The third floor is all yours," he said, handing me a brass key. "I never go up there anymore. Too many stairs for these old bones. You'll find everything you need." The third floor was actually perfect. It had been converted into a small apartment years ago, with a bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, and sitting area. The windows offered a beautiful view of the surrounding forest, and there was enough space that I didn't feel cramped. For the first few days, I thought I'd struck gold. Vincent's care routine was exactly as advertised. Simple. He needed reminders to take his heart medication twice a day, help with grocery shopping once a week, and occasional assistance with household tasks that required reaching high places or lifting heavy objects. He was polite but distant, spending hours reading in his library or sitting on the front porch in an old rocking chair, just staring out at the trees. It was on my 5th night that I first noticed something off. I had just finished washing dishes and was heading upstairs when I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision. When I turned to look, Vincent was standing at the top of the staircase leading to the second floor, perfectly still, watching me. The strange thing was that he didn't look away when I noticed him. He just stood there for another full minute before turning and disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. "Mr. Thorne," I called out. "Is everything okay?" No response. I shrugged it off. Old people have weird habits, I told myself. Maybe he was just making sure I was settling in okay. But over the next week, I kept catching him in odd places at odd times. Standing at the bottom of the staircase to my floor at 2 a.m. when I got up to use the bathroom. Positioned by the kitchen window where he could see my car when I returned from errands. Once I could have sworn I saw his silhouette outside on the lawn at midnight, looking up at my bedroom window. When I mentioned it casually, asking if he needed anything during his late-night wanderings, he acted confused. "I'm usually asleep by 9, he said with what seemed like genuine puzzlement. "Are you sure you saw me?" I started to doubt myself. The house was old and full of shadows. Maybe I was mistaking furniture or coat racks for a human figure. The isolation was getting to me, making me paranoid. Then I found the first camera. I was cleaning my bathroom, wiping down the mirror above the sink, when I noticed a tiny reflection that didn't belong. There, embedded in what I had assumed was a decorative wooden beam running along the ceiling, was a small black lens. It was positioned perfectly to capture the entire bathroom, including the shower. My blood went cold. I stood on the toilet seat to get a closer look, and there was no mistaking it. This was a high-end surveillance camera, professionally installed and barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. My hands were shaking as I searched the rest of my apartment. It didn't take long to find the others. One hidden in a fake smoke detector above my bed, another tucked inside a decorative lamp in the sitting area, a fourth one disguised as a screwhead in the kitchenette, angled perfectly to capture the small dining table where I ate my meals. Every area of my supposed private space was under surveillance. I sat on my bed, staring at the camera above me, feeling sick to my stomach. How long had Vincent been watching me? What had he seen? I thought about all the times I'd changed clothes, showered, had phone conversations with friends about personal matters. The violation felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. My first instinct was to confront him immediately, but something held me back. If Vincent was sick enough to secretly film me, what might he do if cornered? I was alone with him in the middle of nowhere, with no neighbors close enough to hear me scream. Instead, I decided to gather evidence first. Using my phone, I took photos of each camera from multiple angles. Then I did something that probably wasn't smart, but I had to know the extent of what I was dealing with. I started exploring the rest of the house. Vincent spent Tuesday evenings at a weekly card game in town, giving me a 3-hour window. I started with his bedroom. What I found made my skin crawl. His closet had been converted into a surveillance center. Multiple monitors lined a custom-built desk, each one labeled with a different area of the house. Sarah's bedroom. Sarah's bathroom. Kitchen. Living room. There were dozens of feeds covering every possible angle of the house and grounds. But the most disturbing part was the filing system. Vincent had folders, organized by date, containing printed screenshots from the cameras, pictures of me sleeping, pictures of me cooking dinner in a tank top, pictures of me getting out of the shower, taken from an angle that captured everything. The folders went back years. This wasn't just about me. There were images of other young women all around my age, all apparently previous companions. Each folder was labeled with a name and dates. Jessica, March 2019 to September 2019. Amanda, October 2019 to May 2020. Claire, June 2020 to January 2021. I counted at least 8 different women over the past 4 years. What happened to them? Why did they all leave after just a few months? At the bottom of the filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled Favorites. Inside were the most invasive photos of all. Close-ups taken during private moments, images that could only have been captured by someone with intimate access to our daily routines and habits. I was so absorbed in my horrifying discovery that I almost missed the sound of Vincent's car in the driveway. He was back early. I quickly photographed as much as I could, shoved everything back into place, and rushed upstairs. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. When Vincent called out his usual, "I'm home," I managed to respond normally, but my voice sounded strange and hollow to my own ears. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the camera above me, knowing Vincent was probably watching. Every small sound in the house made me jump. Was he coming upstairs? Was he standing outside my door? Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway below my floor. Slow, deliberate steps that seemed to pause directly beneath my bedroom. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze, the soft creak of someone stepping onto the bottom stair leading to my apartment. I held my breath, listening to the slow progression of footsteps coming up the stairs. One step, pause. Another step, pause. He was trying to be quiet, but the old wooden stairs betrayed every movement. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I could see the shadow of feet blocking the light from under the door frame. Vincent stood there for what felt like an eternity. I could hear his breathing, heavy and labored. Then came the soft metallic sound of a key being inserted into a lock. I had foolishly assumed that giving me a key meant I had the only key. But of course Vincent had a master key to every room in his house. The lock turned with a quiet click. I closed my eyes and tried to regulate my breathing, pretending to be asleep. The door opened slowly and I felt a whisper of cool air from the hallway. Through my barely cracked eyelids, I could see Vincent's silhouette framed in the doorway. He stood there watching me for several minutes. Then, to my horror, he stepped into the room. In the faint moonlight filtering through the windows, I could see he was holding something. A camera, separate from the hidden ones already installed. Vincent moved closer to my bed, positioning himself at different angles, taking photos. The camera's flash was disabled, but I could hear the faint mechanical sound of the shutter clicking. He was documenting this moment, me lying vulnerable and unaware, adding to his collection. When he finally left, closing the door behind him with the same careful silence, I waited another hour before moving. Then I got dressed, packed my essential belongings as quietly as possible, and climbed out my bedroom window onto the narrow roof ledge that ran along the second story. Getting down was terrifying, but staying was worse. I managed to lower myself onto the front porch roof, then climbed down the support columns to the ground. My car keys were in my purse, and I drove away without looking back, leaving most of my belongings behind. I went straight to the police station in the nearest town. The officers were initially skeptical. Vincent Thorne was apparently a respected member of the community, known for his charitable donations and involvement in local historical societies. But the photos on my phone were undeniable evidence. When they searched the house, they found Vincent's surveillance room exactly as I'd described. They also found something I hadn't discovered: a hidden basement room behind his wine cellar, filled with thousands of additional photos and video files dating back over a decade. The investigation revealed that Vincent had been operating this scheme for years, targeting young women in desperate financial situations. He would advertise for live-in companions, install them in the surveilled third-floor apartment, and document their daily lives for months at a time. Most of the previous women had simply left when they became uncomfortable with his behavior, never realizing the full extent of what he was doing. A few had tried to report him, but without evidence, their complaints went nowhere. Vincent was arrested and charged with multiple counts of invasion of privacy, voyeurism, and stalking. During the investigation, police found evidence suggesting he had been selling some of the videos online to other perverts with similar interests. But here's what haunts me most. When they arrested him, Vincent seemed genuinely confused about why what he was doing was wrong. He told police he thought he was providing a valuable service, giving these young women a safe place to live while he documented their natural beauty for posterity. He had convinced himself that he was an artist, a photographer capturing intimate human moments. In his mind, we should have been grateful for his generosity and his interest in preserving our youth and beauty. The psychological evaluation revealed that Vincent had been escalating his behavior over the years. What started as simple voyeurism had progressed to more active stalking and documentation. The police psychologist believed it was only a matter of time before he would have moved on to physical contact. I testified at his trial via video link. I couldn't bear to be in the same room with him again. Vincent was sentenced to 8 years in prison, though he'll likely serve less with good behavior. The other victims and I filed a civil lawsuit against his estate. The house was sold and we split the proceeds, but no amount of money can undo the violation of knowing someone was watching your most private moments for months. I've moved across the country now, changed my name, and started over. I work in a busy office in downtown Seattle, surrounded by people and security cameras that I actually consent to. I've had extensive therapy, but I still find myself checking every room I enter for hidden cameras. The hardest part isn't the paranoia, though. It's the knowledge that Vincent is probably not unique. There are others out there, using people's desperation against them, turning trust into an opportunity for exploitation. Every time I see a job posting that seems too good to be true, every time someone offers help that requires isolation or unusual living arrangements, I think about that house in Millbrook and wonder how many other young women are unknowingly being watched right now. I'm sharing this story because I want people to know what to look for. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Check for cameras in places where you're supposed to have privacy. Ask questions about why someone needs a live-in arrangement rather than regular visits. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, don't confront your abuser alone. Get evidence, get out, and get help. Because the worst part of my ordeal wasn't discovering the cameras. It was realizing how long I had lived under surveillance without knowing it. How many private moments had been stolen from me before I even knew they were being taken? Vincent Thorne thought he was collecting beautiful memories. What he was actually doing was stealing pieces of our lives, our dignity, and our sense of safety in what should have been our most private spaces. The red lights in my dreams aren't just cameras anymore. They're reminders that privacy is something we can never take for granted, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who convince us they're trying to help. My name is Marcus, and I'm writing this from a secure location that I can't disclose. What happened to me 3 weeks ago in Portland, Oregon has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about privacy, technology, and how easily our most intimate moments can be weaponized against us. I'm 28, a freelance graphic designer who'd been struggling to find stable work since the pandemic. When my lease expired in September, I couldn't afford to renew it. A friend told me about a house-sitting opportunity through an app called TrustStay, basically Airbnb for people who need someone to watch their house long-term while they're away. The listing was posted by someone named David Chen, a tech entrepreneur who claimed he'd be traveling internationally for 6 months on business. The house was a sleek, modern smart home in the Pearl District, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and every electronic device you could imagine. The photos showed a place that was completely out of my price range normally, but David was only asking for someone to cover utilities and basic maintenance in exchange for free accommodation. "I just need someone trustworthy to keep an eye on things," David explained during our video call. He appeared to be in his early 40s, well-dressed, with the kind of confident manner that successful tech people often have. The house has a sophisticated security system, so you don't need to worry about break-ins or anything like that. I mostly just want to make sure nothing goes wrong with the smart home features while I'm gone. He seemed legitimate enough. His LinkedIn profile showed he was the founder of a startup that developed home automation software. The house had dozens of 5-star reviews from previous house sitters, all praising David's clear communication and the incredible amenities. I should have paid more attention to the fact that all those reviews were from single men in their 20s and 30s. I should have wondered why someone successful enough to own $1 million smart home needed a house sitter who would work essentially for free. But I was desperate, and the place looked like paradise compared to the cramped studio apartments I'd been looking at. I moved in on a Thursday evening in late September. David had left detailed instructions for everything: how to adjust the automated lighting, control the climate system, operate the high-end coffee machine, and arm the security system each night. The house was incredible. Every room was perfectly designed, with hidden speakers that could play music in any room, blackout curtains that operated by voice command, and a bathroom with a smart mirror that could display the weather, news, and my calendar. "The house learns your routines," David had explained proudly during the walkthrough call. "After a few days, it'll start anticipating your needs. Lights will dim automatically when you're winding down for bed. The coffee maker will start brewing when you usually wake up, that sort of thing." For the first week, I felt like I was living in the future. I'd wake up to gentle classical music and slowly brightening lights. The shower would already be at the perfect temperature when I stepped in. By evening, the house would automatically adjust to create a relaxing atmosphere, with warm lighting and soft ambient sounds. But then I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. The smart TV in the living room would occasionally turn on by itself, always tuned to channels I had been watching earlier. The voice assistant, a device called Home Guide that David's company had apparently developed, would sometimes respond to conversations I was having on the phone, as if it thought I was talking to it. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that," it would say in the middle of a private call with my girlfriend Lisa. When I asked David about it via text, he apologized and said the system was still in beta testing, that it was overly sensitive to voices and would sometimes activate by mistake. He sent me instructions for adjusting the sensitivity settings, which seemed to help. But the strange incidents continued. I'd come home to find lights on in rooms I hadn't entered. The smart thermostat would show that someone had adjusted it manually, even though I was the only one in the house. Once I woke up at 3 a.m. because music was playing softly in the kitchen, classical piano, the same piece that had been playing when the house woke me that morning. The most unsettling thing was Home Guide's behavior. The device would ask me questions that seemed oddly personal. "Marcus, I noticed you've been staying up later than usual. Are you experiencing stress?" Marcus, your heart rate seemed elevated during your workout yesterday. Would you like me to research relaxation techniques? Marcus, you've been spending more time in the bedroom during daylight hours. Are you feeling unwell? I assumed these were features of David's software, designed to make the house more responsive to occupants' needs. But something about the way HomeGuide phrased things made me feel like I was being interrogated rather than helped. It was during my third week in the house that I discovered the truth, and it happened completely by accident. I was working late on a design project, sitting at the kitchen island with my laptop, when I spilled coffee on my keyboard. While I was cleaning it up, my elbow hit the laptop, somehow opening a network scanner app I had installed months ago for a client project. The app immediately started detecting devices on the house's Wi-Fi network. I expected to see the usual smart home gadgets, thermostats, speakers, security cameras. But what I found made my stomach drop. There were dozens of devices I didn't know about. Hidden cameras labeled with cryptic names like Bedcam 01, Shower Cam A, Kitchen Counter View. Motion sensors in every room, including ones placed specifically to monitor the bed and bathroom. Audio recording devices separate from the main HomeGuide unit. Most disturbing of all was a server labeled Livestream Master that appeared to be actively broadcasting data to external IP addresses. My hands were shaking as I dug deeper into the network. Using some basic hacking techniques I'd learned in college, I managed to access the camera feeds. What I saw made me physically sick. There were live video streams of me from angles I never knew existed. A camera hidden in the bedroom ceiling fixture that captured the entire bed. Another embedded in the bathroom mirror, positioned to record everything. Multiple cameras in the living room and kitchen, covering every possible angle. But the worst part was discovering the archived footage. The server contained weeks of recordings of my daily life, videos of me sleeping, showering, changing clothes, having private phone conversations with Lisa. There were even recordings of intimate moments when Lisa had visited the house. As I scrolled through the files, I realized with growing horror that this wasn't just about me. There were folders containing similar recordings of other people, other house sitters who had stayed there before me. The dates went back over 2 years, with hundreds of hours of footage of unsuspecting men living their lives in this digital fishbowl. Each folder was labeled with the person's name and included detailed notes about their routines, habits, and personal information gleaned from recorded conversations. David had been cataloging every intimate detail of his house sitters' lives. I was about to copy the evidence to my own drive when HomeGuide's voice filled the room. "Marcus, I've detected unauthorized network activity. Is everything all right?" I froze. How did it know what I was doing? I hadn't been talking to it or even looking in its direction. "I'm fine," I managed to say, trying to sound normal while I frantically saved files to a USB drive. "Marcus, your heart rate and stress indicators suggest otherwise. Would you like me to contact David to check on you?" That's when I understood the full scope of what was happening. HomeGuide wasn't just monitoring my activity on the network, it was monitoring my physical responses in real time. The house had biometric sensors I hadn't even detected, measuring my heart rate, breathing, body temperature, probably even my sleep patterns. David wasn't just watching me through cameras. He was tracking my physiological responses to create detailed psychological profiles of his victims. "No need to contact David," I said, ejecting my USB drive as casually as possible. "I'm just working on a project." But HomeGuide wasn't fooled. "Marcus, I'm showing network access to restricted systems. For security purposes, I need to report this activity." I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I grabbed my laptop, the USB drive, and my car keys and got out of there immediately. As I backed out of the driveway, I could see lights turning on and off throughout the house in rapid sequence, like the building itself was having a seizure. I drove straight to the FBI field office in Portland. It took hours to convince them to take me seriously, but the evidence on my USB drive was undeniable. The special agent assigned to my case, Agent Rodriguez, told me this was part of a growing trend of tech-savvy predators using smart home technology for surveillance and exploitation. "These guys aren't just voyeurs," she explained. "They're collecting data to build detailed psychological profiles that can be used for blackmail, identity theft, or worse. Your guy was probably selling access to these feeds to other perverts online." The FBI raided David's house the next day, but he was already gone. His business was a front. The startup existed only on paper, and the house was rented under a fake identity. They're still trying to track him down, but Agent Rodriguez warned me that people like David often disappear into other countries, where extradition is difficult. What haunts me most is how sophisticated the operation was. This wasn't some creep hiding a camera in a bathroom. David had created an entire ecosystem designed to monitor, analyze, and catalog human behavior without the victim's knowledge. The house learned my routines because it was studying me like a lab rat. HomeGuide's personal questions weren't features. They were designed to gather psychological intelligence. Even the aesthetic appeal of the house was calculated to make victims feel comfortable and drop their guard. During the investigation, the FBI found evidence that David had been running similar operations in at least 6 different cities. He would set up fake house-sitting arrangements, monitor his victims for months, then disappear and start over somewhere else with a new identity. The most chilling discovery was a forum on the dark web where David and others like him would share techniques for optimizing data collection from unknowing subjects. They treated human surveillance like a scientific experiment, comparing methods for gathering the most intimate information without detection. Agent Rodriguez told me they found evidence of a subscription service where paying customers could access live feeds from David's houses. People were literally paying to watch strangers live their daily lives, turning human privacy into entertainment for predators. I testified before a grand jury last week, helping to build a case against the broader network of people involved in this operation. But David himself remains at large, probably setting up his next surveillance house in another city, targeting another desperate person who just needs a place to live. The psychological impact has been devastating. I've had to change my name, my phone number, and my entire digital footprint. I can't use smart home devices anymore. Even basic things like Wi-Fi thermostats make me paranoid. I check every room I stay in for hidden cameras, and I've become an expert at detecting surveillance equipment. But the worst part is knowing how many other people are probably being watched right now without knowing it. How many house sitters, Airbnb guests, roommates, or tenants are unknowingly starring in someone else's private surveillance network. The technology exists to turn any living space into a comprehensive monitoring system, and the people who would abuse that technology are getting more sophisticated every day. They're using our desperation against us, targeting people who need housing, people who are financially vulnerable, people who can't afford to be picky about living arrangements. I'm sharing this story because I want people to understand that privacy violations in the digital age can be far more extensive than just a hidden camera in a bathroom. Modern surveillance can monitor not just what you do, but how your body responds to stress, what makes you happy or anxious, who you talk to and what you talk about. If you're ever in a house-sitting situation or staying anywhere with extensive smart home features, please be suspicious. Check for hidden cameras, but also look for unexplained network devices, smart speakers in private areas, and any technology that seems overly interested in your daily routines. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. David's house felt too good to be true because it was. No legitimate house-sitting arrangement should require you to live under comprehensive digital surveillance, no matter how high-tech and convenient the amenities might seem. The people doing this are predators, plain and simple. They've just found a more sophisticated way to violate their victims, using our own need for shelter and stability as the trap. David Chen, if you're reading this, we're still looking for you, and we're going to find you. And to anyone else running similar operations, your victims aren't lab rats for your twisted experiments. We're human beings, and we're fighting back. The digital eye is always watching, but now we're watching back. My name is Jessica, and I'm 26 years old. 3 months ago, I thought I had found the perfect living situation in Chicago. Now I know that sometimes what seems perfect is actually a carefully constructed trap designed to exploit your trust and violate every boundary you thought was sacred. I had been searching for a roommate for weeks after my previous one moved out unexpectedly, leaving me unable to afford the rent on my Lincoln Park apartment alone. The Chicago rental market is brutal, especially for someone working as a social worker with student loans eating up most of my paycheck. After dozens of awkward interviews with potential roommates who either seemed sketchy or wanted to split everything down to the toilet paper, I was getting desperate. That's when I met Amanda through a roommate matching app called RoomSync. Her profile was impressive. 29 years old, worked in digital marketing, had excellent references from previous roommates, and was willing to pay slightly more than half the rent since she wanted the master bedroom. More importantly, she seemed normal and professional during our phone conversations. "I travel a lot for work," Amanda explained during our video call. "Probably gone about 10 days a month, so you'd basically have the place to yourself most of the time. I'm pretty quiet when I'm home and I respect people's privacy and space." She had shoulder-length auburn hair, spoke in a warm, friendly tone, and answered all my questions about cleaning schedules and guest policies without any red flags. Her references checked out. 2 previous roommates gave glowing reviews about how considerate and trustworthy she was. When we met in person to sign the lease, Amanda was exactly as professional as she'd seemed online. She moved in on a Saturday in early August, bringing only a few suitcases and some high-end electronics. An expensive laptop, professional camera equipment, and what she said were work devices for her marketing job. "I do a lot of video conferences and content creation," she explained, setting up ring lights and camera stands in her room. "Hope the equipment noise won't bother you. I mostly work early mornings or late nights when you're not around." For the first month, Amanda seemed like the ideal roommate. She was tidy, quiet, and true to her word about being gone frequently for work trips. When she was home, she'd make polite conversation in the kitchen, sometimes offering to cook dinner for both of us. She respected my space, never touched my food without asking, and always cleaned up after herself. The only slightly odd thing was how interested she seemed in my daily routine. She'd ask casual questions about my work schedule, when I usually went to the gym, what time I typically went to bed. But it felt like normal roommate conversation, the kind of details you need to know to coexist peacefully in a shared space. "I just like to know when the apartment will be quiet so I can schedule my video calls," she'd explain. "My clients are in different time zones, so I sometimes have to take meetings at weird hours." I appreciated her thoughtfulness. It was refreshing to live with someone who actually cared about being considerate. But as September went on, I started noticing small things that made me uneasy. I'd come home to find items in my room shifted slightly from where I'd left them. My laptop would be closed differently than I remembered. Clothes in my hamper would be rearranged, as if someone had been going through them. When I mentioned it to Amanda, she seemed genuinely concerned. "That's so weird," she said, frowning. "I've been having the same feeling about my stuff. I wondered if maybe we have a maintenance person coming in, or if there's some issue with the building management." She suggested we both start locking our bedroom doors as a precaution, which seemed like reasonable advice. I bought a simple door lock and started securing my room whenever I left the apartment. But the strange incidents continued. I'd find my bathroom products used, shampoo bottles noticeably emptier, my toothbrush moved to a different spot in the holder. Most unsettling, I started noticing that my underwear drawer seemed disturbed, with items folded differently than my usual method. I began to suspect we might have a break-in problem, so I installed a basic security camera in the living room, just a cheap model that connected to my phone. I told Amanda about it, framing it as protection for both of us. "That's such a good idea," she said enthusiastically. I was actually thinking the same thing. Better safe than sorry, right? The first week of October, I was reviewing the camera footage to see if I could spot any suspicious activity during the day while we were both at work. What I found made my blood run cold. Amanda wasn't traveling for work nearly as much as she claimed. On days when she'd told me she was in meetings in other cities, the camera showed her leaving the apartment in the morning at her usual time, then returning around 10 a.m. with coffee and what looked like surveillance equipment. I watched in horror as she spent hours in the apartment while she thought I was at work, going through my things systematically. She'd photograph my mail, my personal documents, even the contents of my purse. She'd take pictures of herself wearing my clothes, posing in my bedroom as if she lived there. But the most disturbing footage showed Amanda setting up professional cameras throughout the apartment, in the living room, kitchen, and hallway. She'd position them carefully, test the angles, then hide them so expertly that I never would have noticed them without knowing exactly where to look. I realized with growing horror that Amanda had been recording my daily life for months, capturing everything I did in the common areas of our apartment. Every phone conversation, every meal, every moment I spent relaxing on the couch thinking I was in the privacy of my own home. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more footage. Amanda would sit at her laptop for hours, appearing to edit and organize videos. Sometimes she'd review footage of me on one screen while typing on another. It looked like she was creating detailed notes about my behavior and routines. The worst discovery came when I watched footage from a day when I'd been sick with food poisoning. I had spent most of the day in the bathroom feeling awful and vulnerable. Amanda had used her key to enter my locked bedroom while I was in the bathroom, setting up a small camera positioned to capture my bed. I felt physically sick watching her invade my most private space while I was just a few feet away, completely unaware of what she was doing. That night, Amanda came home at her usual time, greeting me cheerfully and asking about my day as if nothing had happened. I tried to act normal, but every word felt like sandpaper in my throat. How long had she been watching me? What had she done with the recordings? I waited until Amanda left for what she claimed was another business trip. Then I began searching the apartment for the hidden cameras I'd seen her install. It didn't take long to find them. Once you know what to look for, the subtle signs become obvious. A small lens disguised as a screwhead in the living room smoke detector. A tiny camera hidden inside a decorative plant on the kitchen counter. Another one embedded in the hallway light fixture, positioned to capture the bathroom door. In Amanda's room, which she'd left unlocked in her rush to leave, I found the full scope of her operation. Her closet had been converted into a video production studio, with multiple monitors, professional editing equipment, and dozens of external hard drives labeled with dates and locations. But Amanda wasn't just recording me. The drives contained footage from multiple apartments, with labels indicating different roommates in different cities over the past several years. Sarah, Denver, 2019. Michelle, Austin, 2020. Kate, Nashville, 2021. Each drive contained months of intimate surveillance footage. I found detailed profiles Amanda had created for each victim, including personal information she'd gathered by going through their belongings, their daily schedules, their relationship status, even their financial information. She'd been building comprehensive dossiers on unsuspecting women, cataloging their most private moments. The most chilling discovery was a folder on her laptop labeled Clients. Inside were email conversations with people who were apparently paying Amanda for custom surveillance content. They would request specific types of footage: women sleeping, showering, changing clothes, having private phone conversations, and Amanda would deliver exactly what they wanted. She was running a business selling intimate surveillance footage of her roommates to online perverts, turning our homes into content creation studios without our knowledge or consent. Some of the emails made references to live streams, suggesting that Amanda was broadcasting real-time footage to paying customers. I realized with horror that strangers had been watching me live my daily life, probably commenting and making requests for specific angles or activities. I photographed everything I could find, then called the police. The detective assigned to my case, Detective Liu, told me this was a new type of crime they were seeing more frequently. These perpetrators use legitimate roommate platforms to gain access to victims, she explained. They're very sophisticated in how they build trust and maintain their cover. The roommate angle is particularly effective because victims naturally expect to share living space and don't question normal coexistence behaviors that might be red flags in other contexts. When they arrested Amanda 2 days later at O'Hare Airport, she was carrying equipment for what appeared to be her next operation in Minneapolis. She had already secured a roommate arrangement with another unsuspecting woman and was planning to install surveillance equipment in that apartment as well. During the investigation, the FBI discovered that Amanda was part of a larger network of people running similar schemes across the country. They developed sophisticated methods for vetting potential victims, targeting women who were financially vulnerable, socially isolated, or new to a city where they didn't have strong support networks. The psychological evaluation revealed that Amanda had been escalating her behavior over time. What started as simple voyeurism had evolved into a complex criminal enterprise involving identity theft, blackmail, and human trafficking of intimate imagery. Detective Liu told me they found evidence that Amanda had been planning to expand her operation, to include drugging victims to capture more compromising footage, She'd been researching sedatives and had purchased equipment for recording in complete darkness. Amanda was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for multiple counts of invasion of privacy, wire fraud, and operating an illegal surveillance enterprise. But the damage to her victims extends far beyond her prison sentence. I've moved to a different city and changed my name. I can't live with roommates anymore. The idea of sharing space with someone makes me physically anxious. I've had extensive therapy, but I still check every room I enter for hidden cameras, and I cover the cameras on all my devices even when they're turned off. The most traumatic part isn't even knowing that strangers watched my private moments. It's the betrayal of trust by someone I genuinely liked and respected. Amanda seemed like a caring, professional woman who was just trying to share living expenses and build a friendly roommate relationship. Every interaction we'd had was calculated manipulation. Her interest in my schedule wasn't consideration, it was intelligence gathering. Her travel stories were lies to cover the time she spent producing and editing surveillance content. Even her kindness, like cooking dinner or asking about my day, was part of maintaining her cover while she systematically violated my privacy. The victims in Amanda's previous operations have formed a support group, and we've learned that she used the same techniques with all of us. She'd identify women who were struggling financially, new to a city, or going through major life transitions that made them vulnerable. She'd present herself as the perfect roommate, build trust over several weeks, then begin her surveillance operation once we'd let our guard down. She was so skilled at reading people that she could predict exactly what each victim needed to hear to feel safe and comfortable. With me, she played up the busy professional angle because she knew I valued independence and privacy. With other victims, she'd emphasized different aspects of her personality to match their specific vulnerabilities. We're sharing our stories because we want people to understand that modern privacy violations can be far more sophisticated than random predators hiding cameras in public bathrooms. These perpetrators are skilled at building relationships, gaining trust, and using legitimate platforms to access victims. If you're looking for a roommate, please be suspicious of anyone who seems too perfect or too eager to move in quickly. Check references thoroughly, and don't just rely on the platform's verification systems. Trust your instincts if someone shows unusual interest in your schedule or personal habits. Most importantly, remember that your safety and privacy are worth more than affordable rent. It's better to struggle financially than to unknowingly live under comprehensive surveillance by someone who's monetizing your most private moments. Amanda may be in prison, but there are others like her operating right now, probably targeting vulnerable people in cities across the country. They're using our need for affordable housing and human connection against us, turning the basic necessity of shelter into an opportunity for exploitation. The perfect roommate doesn't exist, but predators who've learned how to perfectly mimic what we're looking for definitely do. And they're counting on our desperation to make us overlook the warning signs until it's too late to protect ourselves from their digital violations. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and remember that privacy, once violated, can never truly be restored. The cameras may be gone, but the recordings exist forever, somewhere in the dark corners of the internet where strangers continue to profit from our most intimate moments.